Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP BW Online Tutorials. In this session, I'm going to explain you a topic of InfoObjects. So before I get into what is InfoObject and how to create InfoObjects in BW, let me give you a brief introduction about InfoObjects in general. So anyhow, at the end of the day, we are talking about a data warehousing, where we are going to store data in tables. So when I say we are going to store data in tables, how it is going to look? So at the end of the day, in the database, we are going to have a structure something like this, and data will be stored in this structure, where columns are going to be my fields and my values are going to store in a row format. So let me take same example that I've explained in our earlier session, where I've explained about the case study that I'm going to cover. So where we have sales order number, customer number, material number, quantity, price, net sales. So these are going to be a typical fields in my sales order information. So what kind of data I'm going to have? Data is going to store in a row format. So sales order 123, customer number 001, material number 00010, quantity 10, price for each piece is 20, total 200. The same way, let's say sales order 124, customer 2, material 21, quantity 20, each piece 50, 1000 USD. Same here, 1000 USD. Now let's talk about sales order 1000, customer 00130, material number 31, quantity 100, each piece price 100 USD, so it will be 10,000 USD. So always our data is going to store as a row format, and each field, each column is going to be individual field at my database. So this is at DB level, database level. So how can we represent a same thing in BW? Definitely we need to create certain objects, right, to represent our columns. So each column at database is an info object in SAP BW. So for each column we have to create an info object. Okay, so by this simple example itself, we can say info objects are going to be lowest model or lowest object in BW system. So that is the definition of info object. So info objects are the smallest pieces in BW system. So these are going to be the first level of modeling objects in BW. So whenever we talk about certain data, nothing but certain table, the first thing is we have to identify how many info objects we have to create. So that's the reason info objects are the smallest pieces in SAP BW, and they are used to describe business information. So whatever the data we are going to store in tables is business data. So they are used to describe, or they are used to represent business information. Okay, so typical examples for info object, that what I've explained now: customer name or customer number, or region or country, or net sales or revenue or currency, or year, physical year, or calendar month, or calendar date, or calendar week. So these are going to be the typical examples for info objects. So once again, the definition for info object is: info objects are the smallest pieces in BW system which are used to represent business information, or we can say which are used to represent columns at DB level. Okay, so now in this, with this example itself, we can see we have different types of data here. See, I have data with numbers, I have a fields with quantity, where I have to mention what is a type of quantity here, whether it is kg or meter or one piece, because without unit this value doesn't have meaning. It's not going to have any meaning. Here also, price. So what is this? Is it USD? Is it INR? Is it UR? What is that? So for measures, so typically these are going to be my measures. So for measures, we always need to have identification for that. Is it a unit or is it a currency? So if it is currency, what is the currency type? If it is unit, what is the unit type? Okay, at the same time, these are going to be my master data. What is my customer number? What is my material number? All those things. So typically we have 5 types of info objects in SAP BW. So what are those 5 types? Are characteristic info objects, okay, key figure info objects, unit info objects, time info objects, technical info objects. Now I will explain each and every one. So in general, we are going to represent master data with characteristics info objects. So if we see the table here, or let's take our sample data, where I have my entire transaction data file. So here we can say the first, this section of fields gives master data, or gives information about one particular operation that has happened. So when I say one particular operation, in this case it's a sales order. So when one particular sales order is created, it gives the information about that sales order, like who has created, who has ordered that, and to whom we have to deliver, and what is the materials has to be delivered with that sales order, and to which region it has to deliver, okay, and from which plant it has to deliver. So all those things we have here. So these are all going to be master data. Then comes transaction data, like how much we have to deliver and what is the amount we are going to get. So these are going to be my facts or measures. So in BW system, all the master data is going to be represented with characteristics, whereas all the transaction data, when I say transaction data, it's facts or measures. So measures are going to be represented with key figures. And what is a unit? So when I say facts or measures, it will be either amount, it will be either quantity. So both should have a unit or currency for that. So those are going to be defined as unit info objects. So when I say unit info objects, it can be my currency, it can be my unit, kg, centimeter, all those things. So typical examples for that is unit of weight or currency. then time. So obviously for every data we are going to have time for that, like when that particular order is created or when this particular invoice has been generated. So when I say when this is generated, I'm going to have certain date. So obviously when we represent this data for a user, he wants to have year, month or week or day separated from that time period. So those are going to be created as time characteristics. So few examples for time characteristics are year, month, week. It can be day, calendar day. So the next one, the last one is technical info objects. So when I say technical info objects, these are related to BW system. We cannot create any additional info objects. These are related to system info objects. Like when we load certain amount of data, and system will generate one ID for that, which is nothing but request ID. Okay. Or when system updates certain data into the tables, it will generate a change request ID. So that is nothing but change ID. So these are all called technical info objects. So all these info objects will be delivered as part of business content. So we are going to have a lot of info objects delivered as part of business content. As I explained, business content is a pre-delivered objects, pre-delivered well-built objects delivered by SAP when we buy a BW system. So when we get a requirement, the first thing we have to do is we need to search in the business content and check whether there are any objects that suits for our requirement. So if we found any suitable objects, we'll go and install them and then we'll use those objects. However, if we don't find any objects for our requirement, then we can create our own objects. We can create custom objects, customized objects in BW system. That means we can create our own info objects. So out of these 5 types of info objects, we can only create 3 types of info objects. The other 2 we cannot create. We can only use the system delivered objects. So the objects that we can create are, we can create characteristic info objects, we can create key figure info objects, and we can create unit info objects. But we cannot create our own time and technical info objects. As I mentioned, technical info objects are related to BW system. So it's quite clear that we don't need to create anything as it is related to system. The next question will be, why don't we create a new time info objects? Because SAP has delivered all the time info objects. So you don't need to create any additional info objects. So whatever the kind of a period or time you need, you will always find a relevant info object in business content. So we can go ahead and use those business content. We don't need to create any additional time info objects. So that is about a types of info objects we have. Then we'll see the definition of each one. So characteristic info object. The kind of info object symbolizes a business entity that you will certainly be analyzing. Just for example, material, customer or region. It's like characteristics are going to be, our characteristics will hold the data that is going to be used to analyze organization measures or organization facts or organization values. So at the end of the day, customer will always analyze either quantity or net sales based on customer number or material number. They will never analyze based on sales order number because this doesn't give any sense. So here my customer number or material number are going to be my master data, nothing but characteristic info object. Then key figure info object. Key figures are going to be organization values. Okay, so a few examples like quantity or price or amount or weight. Then comes time info objects. So this gives when one particular operation has occurred or when one particular transaction has happened. Okay, so it can have a lot of details like in which year it has happened, in which month, in which week, in which date, or in which quarter. So examples for time info objects are going to be year, quarter, month, a week, a date. So these are going to be typical info objects, time related info objects. Then unit info objects. As I explained earlier, unit info objects are there in BW to give meaningful information for our key figures. So here we have, right? So what we have here, I have quantity. So when I say quantity 1984, what is this? So I have unit of weight here or unit of measure. So when I say 1984 kgs, it gives proper meaning. Same way here, I have value, total value. So when I say 36507.85, what is it? Is it an USD or is it INR? Is it a euro? Is it pounds? What is that? So when I give proper currency, then it will get a complete meaning. So unit info objects are either unit of measure or a currency, which gives a meaningful information to the key figures. Then technical info objects. So these are SAP internal, which are related to BW system, which will be generated internally when we perform certain operations in BW system, like loading data or activating data or updating data. So whenever we do such kind of operations in BW, system will generate certain IDs for backend purpose or for backend maintenance. So those are going to store in technical info objects. So few notes that we have to take from here is we have 5 types of info objects, namely characteristics, key figures, unit, technical, and time characteristics. So out of this, we can only create 3 types of info objects in BW, whereas we can only create 3 types of custom info objects. Okay, whereas we cannot create two types of custom info objects. Those are time and technical. Okay, so now we'll log into our system and we'll see how to create info object in BW. So let me log into our system. I'll close this as I shown in our earlier sessions. So to log into any SAP system, you need to have SAP logon installed. So once you have logon installed, get the connection details from basis consultant, and once you have the connection details, you have to add a new connection here. Like the connection details required are going to be your application server, instance number, and system ID. Once you have these details, when you add them, you will get details like this. Then double click on the system in which you want to log in. So this is going to be initial logon screen where we'll enter our username and password. Then by default it will log into English language. So if you want to log into some other language, you can specify your logon language here. So I want to log into English, so I'll not specify anything here. Login. Then the transaction code for all the modeling or for most of the activities in BW is RSA1, which is a data warehousing workbench. We can see the description here. And right now we are in modeling. So to create a new info objects, we have to go to info objects folder here. So to click on this info objects, where we'll get info objects related screen here. So here the objects are maintained in a hierarchy structure, because when we talk about a BW system for a large scale industry or for a medium scale industry, definitely they will have a lot of tables and they're going to have a lot of fields. So we might end up with creating huge number of info objects. So how can we maintain those info objects? How can we organize those info objects properly in BW system? So to organize or to maintain the info objects properly in BW system, SAP has used InfoArea. So objects in BW system, like it can be info objects, or it can be DSOs, or it can be info cubes, or it can be info providers. These are all organized using InfoArea. So InfoArea is used to organize objects in a BW system. Okay, so these are all info areas. So this symbol refers to info area, and in one info area we can have another info area again. So typical example for info area is going to be like when you have info objects related to SD, sales and distribution, then you can create one info area for SD and keep all the info objects related to that in that info area. Then create one more info area for finance, create one more info area for COPA, and create one more info area for purchasing. So it can be, objects can be organized based on your function module. So we can create individual info areas for each function module and keep all the relevant info objects under that info area. So now we'll create our own info area here. So just to create a new info area, you can right click here, right click on info objects name here and create info area. So first we have to give technical name. Technical name cannot be changed later, so be sure to give a correct name and recheck once before we continue here. So all the customized objects will be, or we can start all the customized objects in BW with Z. So I'm going to start with Z. I'll put training IA. So IA stands for info area. So I'll give info area for SAP BW tutorials. We can give a description, anything. Okay, then I'll click on continue. So now I can see info area here, the newly created info area. Info area for SAP BW tutorials, and technical name is this ZTRNZ_IA. So if I want to create another info area under this, so I can right click here, again create info area. Some test IA, just for testing purpose to show you I'm creating this. Actually we don't need it. So now we can see, right, under this info area, under our main info area, we have one more info area. So it's based on our requirement or how we are going to maintain or organize our info objects. We can create n number of info areas that we want. So I'll delete this info area, right click, delete. Yes, so this will delete. So we don't have that info area again. And we can see the message also here, info area test_IA deleted. So now we have info area. So in info objects, so what is the definition of info area is to maintain or organize our info objects. So how many types of info objects we have? We have 5 types. And majorly how many types of info objects we regularly create? I mean, when I say we regularly create those info objects in a huge number of bases. So typically we might be creating either characteristic info objects or key figure info objects. So what SAP did is they have again tried to maintain and organize key figure info objects separately and characteristic info objects separately. So that's why when we right click on our info area, we'll get create info object catalog. So this info object catalog is a given to manage info objects further. So I'll go ahead and create an info area. So info object catalog can be created either for characteristics or for key figures. So we don't have any info object catalog for unit info objects because we rarely create custom custom unit info objects. So we have info object catalogs either for characteristics or for key figures. So first I'll create info object catalog for characteristics. So what name we'll give? I'm going to give ZTRNZ or it's info object catalog, right? Info object catalog. I'll put CR or we'll give the same thing, ZTRNG character. So it's here we have to give description. So catalog for characteristics. So if you have any existing object and you want to use those properties for this, you can use this copy from and you can give that object name here. So we don't have any existing object using which we can create this new object, so I'm not going to give anything here. So this info object catalog, I want to use it for characteristics. So if you want to use it for key figure, we have to mention here. So anyhow I want it for characteristic. Once I give these details, I'll click on create. So now we can see info object catalog here, and it doesn't have any characteristics under this because if we see the status here, it's inactive. So unless the objects are active in BW system, we cannot use those objects. So to activate any object, we have symbol here, a stick symbol, matchstick. We'll click on that to activate any object. So now we can see, right, it has been successfully activated because we have got green message here, green symbol, or even we can see the status here. This particular object has been successfully activated, and we can also see the status here. It has been changed to active and executable. Earlier it was inactive, non-executable. So now we have info object catalog, because if we see here under our info area we have info object catalog called Z training care. So now I'll create one more info object catalog for key figures. So I'll put Z trnz key. So catalog for key figures. So here we have to select key figure and then create. Now it's in inactive, not executable. We'll activate this to make it active and executable. So these also activated successfully. I'll come back. So we have info area under which we have one catalog for characteristics and one more catalog for key figures. Now we are ready to go with creation of info objects. So all the info objects that comes as part of business content starts with 0. So whatever the info objects that we are going to get as part of business content, all those info objects names are going to start with 0. Whatever the info objects that we are going to create, the best practice or the best naming convention is will start with Z. Okay. Even if you want to start with 0, we cannot start, because 0 is assigned or allocated for business content objects. So the technical name of info object, the technical name of custom created info object, custom info object should not start with 0 and any special character. It should not start with special character also. It can start with any other character like B, C, D, anything you can use. So typically to represent or to give a common naming convention, we'll start with Z, and length should be 9. It can be only of 9 characters. So now let's have a look at the data we have. So these are a number of flat files or CSV files we have, which we need to load to BW. So these are main transaction data. Okay, and these are all going to be my master data, because when we look at our transaction data, what we have here, we have all the values. When I say customer, I have customer numbers. When I say material numbers. When I say division shortcut code. When I say material group shortcut code. When I say plant shortcut code. When I say company code shortcut code. So if I display, or if we display these values in the report, user will not understand. They will never understand. They want descriptions for each and everything. So descriptions will be loaded separately into our characteristic info objects. So where we have descriptions, we have descriptions here. So when I say sales group, we have descriptions here. So when sales group is 112, then the description for that is SZ002. User will understand this. User will never understand 112. So 112 is for a database purpose. It's not for user purpose. So for user we have to display these values. So these values we are going to store separately in info objects, I mean characteristic info objects. Now let's have a look at our customer information. So here I have customer numbers and customer related additional information, like under which customer group this particular customer will come, and in for which sales group he will come, and for which sales district, and for which sales office, and who is the sales employee that is dedicatedly assigned for this particular customer. Everything we have information here. So we'll see how we can create info objects, custom info objects for this, and we'll load a data to BW. So before we go ahead and create custom info objects, let's say custom characteristic info objects, we have to first search in our system like whether we have any specific business content available for this or not. So typically this is customer related information. Definitely we might look for customer info objects. So let's see. So these are modeling area, right? I'll click on find and I'll search with customer, and then we'll see whether there are any objects with customer, and I'm going to select info objects because that is what we are looking right now, right? So I'll click on search. So we have so many customer related, but we need, if we see here, these are all customer group 1, group 2. We don't want those. We want a typical customer. Okay. So where are we? We have one object that has delivered as part of business content, which is 0 customer. So we'll see how it has. So we have typical information here, and this particular customer has a lot of additional fields here. We can see, right, there are a lot of additional fields, whereas if we look at our customer information, we have only few. We don't have those many additional information. So instead of modifying the existing one, we'll go ahead and create our customized information or our customized object for customer. So to create our own info object, we'll go to info objects folder under our info area, and then our info object catalog will create our new characteristic. So I'll right click on info object catalog for characteristic and create info object. So this will give this screen where we have to enter technical name of this info object, I mean technical name for this characteristic, and description. So technical name, I'll start with Z. I'll enter Z customer, or so it has to be maximum of 9 letters. So I'll enter ZTRNZ CUST. So this will increase. It will be total of 10. So I don't want this. So I'll put ZBW customer, and then I'll put description as customer information. So here we have additional 2 options, a reference characteristic and a template. So what are these option means? So we'll see. Well, I'll explain this with an example. So the first one is a reference and the second one is a template. Let's assume we have characteristic A available in BW system. Now I want to create a new characteristic B, which is going to be more or like similar to A. So instead of selecting all the settings that I have done for A while creating B, what I can do is I can make use of either reference or template option. So what happens when I use reference is system will copy or system will use info characteristic A as a reference for B. Okay. Whereas in future, if you want to do some changes to characteristic B, you cannot do. Those changes has to be done for characteristic A itself. Because when you use a reference, the only modification that you can do for a newly created object is description. Except description, you cannot change anything. So everything will be used as characteristic A is. So if you want to have any changes for characteristic B, you have to do those changes for characteristic A itself. Suppose if we use the second option, which is a template, what system will do is initially it will take all the settings from characteristic A, and when we activate the characteristic B, which is newly created, system will create all the settings for characteristic B itself. It will not use the characteristic A ones. So the advantage with this is whenever you want to do a changes for characteristic B, you can do. Whereas in our earlier case, we cannot do those settings for characteristic B. We have to do for characteristic A itself. So that is the difference between a reference and a template. So in our case, we don't have any such scenario. So I'll leave these two as empty and I'll click on continue. So just click on this green tick mark to go further. So this is a characteristic creation screen. So I'll use this navigator on and off option, which hide this section to make it a bit more space for this area. So I'll click this. Okay, I think we have to give additional, basic settings before we do that. So the typical objects or the typical options we have here. So generally we are going to have 6 tabs here. So the first one is general, business explorer, master data and text, hierarchy, attribute and compounding. So I'll explain one by one. The first we'll see a general tab. So when I say general tab, we'll see what are the options we have and what is the use of each and every option. So the above the general tab, we have like the technical name of the characteristic object and the long description, short description. So we'll have three types of descriptions in BW for each and every object. So we'll have short description, medium description, long description. So it can be of 20 characters. This is 40 characters. So 60 characters. So this is the difference between short, medium and long descriptions. Okay, and version we can see here, it's still a new version because we have not activated it. And we can see object status inactive, non-executable. Now the major settings here are going to be, we have to define data type. So whether it is a character or whether it is numeric, whether it is dates or times. So these are the 4 types of data types that supports for characteristic info object. So if we are going to store any description kind of thing, then we can specify the data type as character, because here we can see, right, here we have letters or characters for customer group and customer group 1. So for such kind of these things, we'll define the data type as char, whereas here it's all numbers. So for this we can go ahead and define it as number, and here it's date format. So for these 2 fields we can define that data type as date. So the other one we have is times. So time is to store our time period, like, so BW stores time period as hours, minutes and seconds. So these are the 4 types. So whereas for our case we need customer as character, so I'll put this as char. Then the next one is, we have to define the length. So length is always going to be based on the source data we are going to get. So it's like how much length we are going to get in our source data, we have to define length based on that. So here, let's say if we look at our data, like customer attributes, typically we have a 6. So maybe for future purpose we'll define that as 10. So we'll give value 10 as length. Okay, then the next option we have is lowercase letters. So what is the advantage with lowercase letters? Let's say I have my customer name as Walmart. So here I have both, like I have uppercase letters and I have lowercase letters. So if I check this option here, lowercase letters, what system will do is, it will take the source data as it is, like as it is there in the source, it will take a same. That means it will allow both uppercase and lowercase letters. If I don't, if I uncheck this, then what system will do is, when we load the data, it will make it like this. So that is the difference between a lowercase letters and not allowing lowercase letters. Then the next one, conversion routines. By default for characteristics we'll have alpha conversion, whereas in BW we have a lot of conversion routines. So based on our requirements we can use conversion routines if we want. So I'll just explain what is alpha conversion. So here I have defined length as 10. Okay, whereas in our source we can see our customer numbers are of length 6. So now how system has to store? So as I defined 10, if I use alpha conversion, system will store, let's take an example of 10002. 10002. So system will store this as 0010022. So it will add the leading zeros, so that we'll have uniqueness in the data or uniformity in the data. So that is the advantage of alpha conversion. So now the next option we have is transfer routine. So transfer routines are ABAP based. So if you want to do certain manipulations or certain changes before we load data into BW, like if I have a sales order group 10, I want Europe. Instead of 10, I want to load that as Europe. So such kind of manipulations, data manipulations can be done using transfer routines. Okay, and the next options is attribute only. So when we select this as attribute only, we cannot add any attributes for this specific object. Okay, so usually we will not check this until unless it is required. And then the next one is characteristic is document property. So if we want to maintain any document for this, then we have to check this option. So right now we don't need this option. So these are the settings that are available under general tab. Okay, now and these are going to be the basic settings. So once we do these settings, we can go ahead and activate our info object. However, we'll see what are the other options that we have in other tabs as well. So now let's move on to Business Explorer tab. So all these options are the options that are under Business Explorer tab is related to reporting, like how you want to display this particular object in the reports while showing it to the users. So the first option we have is display. What you want to display, whether you want to display a text of this object or whether you want to display the key. So when I say key, the key is going to be ZBW cust. When I say text, text is customer information. So definitely I want to display customer information, description instead of key, because keys cannot be understood by users. So I'll display text, because we have different options here. Either you can display key or only text, or we can also display key and text or text and key. So however we want, we can choose the option here. So I'm going to choose text, and then text type. Is it a short text or default one? So I want to display short text. And then Bex. So Bex is a reporting tools, right? So how we want to display it in Bex? So I want to show short description, because long description will be too lengthy for the user. So I want to display short description. And then if you want to have any selections on this, we can choose an option here. And then when users are doing a filter at query level, from where the values has to populate. So there is option for this here. Okay. So values has to be displayed from master data tables, or values has to be displayed from info provider. Basically it will be values from our master data tables. So most of the times we don't need to change any settings which are present under Business Explorer. And the other important option here is authorization relevant. So if you want to restrict data in this particular info object to specific users, then we have to check this option, authorization relevant. Then only we can restrict the data in this particular info object to specific users. So for our requirement, we don't need this. So I'll uncheck this. So this is about a Business Explorer tab. The next one we have is master data. Okay, so from the master data tab, and then hierarchy, attribute, and compounding, I'll explain this in a next video. Thank you for watching.